Dyson about the organic school, the Single Tax Corporation, the Bank of Fairhope, and anything else he wants to talk about. Sam, tell us a little bit about your family and when you came to Fairhope.
My father and mother were born in Bolton, England, came to the United States on the 30th of June in 1900. Came over on what was supposed to be a wedding trip, but Dad never went back for 28 years.
Wow.
Boat landed in Philadelphia to start off with, and it was in Philadelphia that they read Henry George's book, Progress and Poverty, and met Joseph Fels, and came to Fairhope as a result of that connection. Dad and Mother came here in 1904, built a small house on Fels Avenue, and lived here for the rest of their lives. Dad became a member of the Single Tax Corporation. Mother served on the City Colony Council for 30 years.
Wow.
And Dad was president of the corporation for 20 years.
And your dad was Marmaduke Dyson, right?
That was Marmaduke Dyson.
Okay, I remember him.
While he was president, I really didn't think he did a whole lot for the corporation, but looking back on the situation, I realized I was wrong. We had no lawsuits while he was president, no problems, no serious problems of any kind. Between he and the council, they were able to solve such problems as they had. They opened 2 subdivisions, one on the old golf course and the other the Magnolia Beach addition to Fairhope. And things were smooth and quiet in the organization. So looking back on the situation, I have to acknowledge that perhaps his administration was all right.
Yeah, sounds like it.
As you know, the Single Tax Corporation founded Fairhope, and for a while, a long time in fact, it was the main factor in the community. The town of Fairhope received all the parklands by gift, most of which came from the Single Tax Corporation. Those gifts were made in 1932 and 1933. And our beaches and parks throughout the city are here and open to the public because of the effect of the Single Tax Corporation.
Do you remember what year the library was given to the city? It seems as I recall that happened during my lifetime.
The library was given to the city in 1964.
Oh yeah, okay.
We had an election in the Single Tax Corporation, and only 3 of us voted to continue operating the library as a Single Tax Corporation library. But the library was donated to the city, and the city took over its operation in 1964. It had operated from 1910 until 1964, mainly by the support of the Single Tax Corporation and $1 membership fees paid by members of the Library Association, an assessment of $1 a year. The Single Tax Corporation ran the library without any federal or other assistance, and it was reputed to be one of the best small libraries in the area.
That's right. Had a good reputation.
Yes.
I remember the little museum room they had there, and I would go in there every so often and look at that huge snakeskin they had back there.
Yes, yes.
I guess did those little artifacts go to the present library?
I don't know. I presume they may have stayed in that building. Regrettably, artifacts and things that appear to be of value to one group of people don't strike the recipient of them quite the same. And quite often, valuable objects of art and history forming items are not preserved as they should be.
That's true.
Frankly, I don't know about the library.
Yeah, okay. So, weren't you president of the Single Tax Corporation at one
For
time?
only 2 years.
Uh-huh.
I was rather too old for the position when I went into it, but we had a situation in which a group of people had persuaded the state legislature to make an attempt to put the Single Tax Corporation out of business by withdrawing the charter. We had quite a battle to win that proposition before the state legislature, and we did win. However, it was entirely a waste of time because the Dartmouth College case before the United States Supreme Court would have made it impossible for them to cancel the charter of the Single Tax Corporation, because the Dartmouth College case says no state may enact any law abridging the rights of contracts, and the Single Tax Corporation had over 1,000 contracts with lessees, and there's nothing the state or anyone else could do to pass a law to abridge those contracts. But we spent a lot of money, and I was put in as president to defend that case, and we defended it successfully. We did it by going before we arranged to have the bill taken from the Finance Committee and put in the State Law Committee, and we had a vote of 7-1 in our favor before that committee, because obviously all the law was on our side, but there was a definite attempt made to injure the Single Tax Corporation at that time. I've forgotten the year of that.
What year were you president? Do you remember that? Do you remember what year you were president?
1976 and 77.
Okay.
And it's my age that caused me not to stand for election. I don't know whether I'd have been elected, but anyway, I didn't take a chance. I'm not really a very good gambler, and I thought, gee whiz, I might not win this election, so I did not run.
Well, you had other interests at that time too. Were you
Well,
still involved in
I had been in the bank for 20 years, and I also withdrew from the bank at the same time. I went into the bank. We had just a little over $2 million in total resources. I was there 20 years. While I was there, we increased the dividend every year. We grew and expanded the operations, opened branches in Daphne and Robertsdale and Spanish Fort during that period. And our aim was to serve the community and serve the community well, and that's what we did. We had splendid cooperation from all the officers of the bank. But John Beasley was the president. I was never the president of the bank. I was chairman of the board of directors, but never the president. John was an excellent president.
Well, before him, wasn't it Henry George Bishop?
Henry George Bishop had been president, but the first president of the bank was G.R. Hammett from Daphne, and then a very popular man, Henry Crawford's grandfather, was president for a number of years. And the bank always served the community well.
Was Kirby Wharton one of the...
Kirby Wharton was
Yeah,
president
okay.
at one time.
Those are the names I
M.F.
remember.
Northrop was president.
Who?
M.F. Northrop. Clayton Baldwin was president for a short period of time. But the bank opened on August the 9th in 1917, and we had the only bank in the county that did not close for at least a short period of time. Our bank never closed. And Kirby Wharton and several of us got together and worked out a deal. We made scrip, which we handed out to our customers when they wanted to make withdrawals. We could not let them draw money, but we could give them these scrip, which took the place of dollars, and they were traded openly around town at full face value, and that's how we managed to operate without closing.
How about that?
It was a unique situation. Frankly, I'm not sure when President Franklin Roosevelt ordered the banks to be closed, being rebels, we decided not to do that. We stayed open.
I didn't know he ordered them closed. That's how much I'm up on
we
history.
had what was known as a bank holiday in the middle of February in 1933.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember the exact date, but that was,
Was it just for one day?
oh no, they were closed for quite an extended period. And the Bank Deposit Insurance Corporation was organized, and as banks reopened, they had to secure this insurance, which insured the customers' accounts. That was a new development, and it was a very good thing for all the banks.
And the customers.
And the customers, yes.
Well, did your bank, since it didn't have to close, I guess it had to go ahead and get the insurance anyhow, didn't
Oh,
it,
yes,
to operate?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
But our bank had no trouble doing that because it was in better condition. But what really saved the bank was the people in Fairhope. If they had withdrawn their money, if we'd had a run on, no bank can withstand a run.
That's right.
We never had a run.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, this man Joseph Fels, who was so favorable to the Single Tax Corporation, had been gone, but he was replaced as a friend of this community by a man who's owned the big paper manufacturing company in Bangor, Maine. And he maintained a substantial account in the Bank of Fairhope, and of course he said that he was going to leave his money here, and that was one of the factors that helped keep the bank open. The Single Tax Corporation was really the major factor in the bank not closing, not because of what it did during the Depression, but its policy before the Depression in not overextending loans on real estate. That was, of course, part of the single tax value to the community, the fact that they people did not own the land, consequently they couldn't over-borrow against real estate. And real estate loans are unfortunately one of the biggest problems to banks if trouble starts. But the Bank of Fairhope had opened on August the 9th, 1917. It's been in business ever since, and after I sold out my interest in the bank, it was bought then by Central Bank of Birmingham and is now Compass Bank.
Let's see, it was First National Bank of Fairhope for a while.
It was first the Bank of Fairhope,
yeah.
And we converted to a national bank because of certain factors that made it appear advantageous to the bank and to the community. We converted to a national bank. And we were operating as a national bank. Frankly, I don't know whether Compass Bank is a national or state bank right now. But with the various insurance regulations that banks have, it is not a serious factor. I'm proud to say that we helped this bank in Fairhope grow so that when I went into the bank, we were not the strongest bank, we were one of the weakest and the third largest in the county. By the time I left, we were not only the largest, but we were much the largest.
How did the bank get started?
The bank was started by my wife's father.
And who was that?
Philip H. Porter.
Okay.
He was the man who really started the bank. I have a copy of the original charter, which I don't show unless I'm forced to, because when people challenge what I say about the bank, I have to be able to back up and prove what I've said, and so I do have a copy of that charter.
And that was in
But the bank has strictly been a local bank. We have some out-of-town stockholders, but not many. Of course, now that's all changed. The Compass Bank in Birmingham is the major bank and the major bank in the holding company that now owns what used to be the First National Bank of Fairhope.
That's a typical of one of the things I see of the changes that have gone on in Fairhope. So years ago, I remember that the storekeepers, the shop owners, and bank owners were local people.
Yes.
And now we have all kinds of little glitzy shops downtown, and of course chain supermarkets and such things. And none of, very few of them are owned by local folks. A lot of them are.
Well, frankly,
Out of
I
town.
don't know the current local situation. I'm sort of out of touch. Since I had to stop driving a car, I don't get around very often. I have an excellent helper. My wife drives for me, but there's a limit to what I can ask her to do, and I try not to ask her to do things that she can't do.
Yeah.
And one of them is driving too much. We get around as much as we have to, but of course I'm a native of Fairhope. I was born on February the 16th in 1908. I passed my 86th birthday. I've been in a number of offices in the town and other things connected with it. And at one time I was considered one of the leading citizens in the community.
I think you still are considered that.
Well, possibly, but it's. I'm grateful for my friends, and my friends have been responsible for anything that I've done good has been because I've had tremendous help from my friends. My wife and I have worked diligently to keep the organic school solvent since 1947. And we've been successful, but only because of the help we've gotten from the friends and from teachers and other people who really worked, I was going to say with us, but have worked for the school. Of course, the school and the Single Tax Corporation are my two major interests in this area. And the school was opened in 1907 by Marietta Johnson. Maybe somebody else will talk about the school. But there was never a tuition charge throughout her lifetime. And she was able to keep the school going by receiving contributions as a result of her lectures, which she conducted, I was going to say, perhaps all over the United States and also in Europe. She was on the program of the International Education Association in Europe on 3 different occasions. She was a speaker who was, the only way I can explain her is that she was a spellbinder. Well, that is not the proper term because that sort of indicates, you know, a person saying just anything to make themselves popular. She was a very learned person, a very commanding speaker, and she could keep the attention of an audience for an unlimited time. And she devoted her entire life to children and their education. And the organic school was financed almost entirely by her and, again, as I say, by friends.
But when she died in, like, what, 1938, then somebody had to pick up the pieces and go on.
That was done by an organization of faculty members, of which you may have been one, Flo, I don't remember.
No.
But anyway, the members of the faculty held a meeting and got together and decided that they would continue to teach and accept whatever funds were available to be distributed among the various faculty members. And they started in 1937 and continued for 10 years on that basis. But immediately, or almost immediately after World War II, that system sort of played out. And we reorganized the school, and it's been operating on the reorganized basis ever since. We have a board of managers, which is far too large, it's unmanageable, but we have been able to operate so far.
Oh, aren't there
But
18
it's people
board?
just like Flo Snyder who pitched in and helped whenever we called on them. I think you were teaching in 1952 and 3, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I was later than that. I was later than that.
You were?
I
Maybe
didn't
I'm
teach.
trying to make you too old.
Yeah, you're trying to make me too old. I didn't teach until the 70s.
70?
Or the late I may have done a little singing teaching in the late 60s.
Well, I remember
I did, in about 66.
I remember teaching classes in the single tax up there on the campus, and you helped me out.
That's right, that was in the 70s,
That was in the
about
70s.
72 or 3.
But we'd always had made an effort to teach the Henry George classes at the school, and I think we were successful at it. And oddly enough, this is a fact that really isn't very well known, but the life and existence of the Single Tax Corporation and the organic school have been tied together by some invisible force. I don't know what it is. But the same people who've really been vitally interested in the Single Tax Corporation, when they came to Fairhope, if they came because of the school or they came because of the Single Tax Corporation, either one or the other or both, but by their very nature and by their training and background, they were always interested in both organizations.
That's right.
And
And we've lost that now that the organic school doesn't have a high school. Do they still try to teach the single tax theory to the...
I'm sure they do, but I can't say that as a positive fact because I don't know. I am no longer on the board of the school, but I am not a member of the trustees of the school trust fund. I did set up a trust fund for the school back in 1962, and that trust fund today furnishes a share of the funds to keep the school operating. Not enough to fully finance the thing, but enough to assure its existence. Mrs. Johnson never saw fit to set aside any funds. I think if she'd done that, the school would have probably had a substantial endowment fund created by the time of her death. She never thought in terms of money. She did pay remarkably good salaries to some of the people we had in the school, and we really had an excellent faculty during her lifetime. We had faculty members graduates from Oxford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, Chicago, Oklahoma, and from Madrid, Spain, and from Heidelberg. There was a time when we had probably the most capable faculty in the state of Alabama. The school under Mrs. Johnson graduated a class of seniors in 1910. Then for about 3 years there were no graduating classes, but from 1914 on, the school was able to graduate a class of seniors through World War II and World War III, and that continued until
World War II and...
World War I and World War II.
Okay, all right.
Wait a minute.
You know, I knew what you
World War
meant.
III is coming, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, I knew what you meant, but somehow it didn't sound
Well,
quite
I'm
right.
certainly glad you mentioned that.
Okay.
That's, I regret to say that's one of the faults that, one of the problems that develops when a person, I'm 86 years old.
Well, you can say anything you want. You can say anything you want, and you can wear anything you want when you get over 80. I've made that rule.
Well,
Especially
I'll tell
in
you,
Fairhope.
I have a statement which I say, you know, you sort of be quiet about your age until you get past 80, and from then on you just brag about it.
That's right. There you go. Well, I decided to start bragging when I was 60, so I'm already bragging. Well, okay, so you, let's see. We've talked about the school and single tax and bank, and what else do we need to discuss here?
Well, there's one thing I might mention that I don't think is going to come to light during this centennial, we had a very nice 9-hole golf course here in Fairhope, which opened in 1914, and it was abandoned as a golf course immediately following World War II. It was a darn shame because it would have fit perfectly into our present situation when we have so many older people retired, and they could walk out there and could walk around.
Yeah.
You know, they have these golf courts carts on golf courses today, and from where I sit, they're the invention of the devil, because the older people who should be walking get in those carts and ride around, and that robs them of the main reason for playing golf.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, we did have a golf course here, and I was caddy in the first tournament out there in 1924, and that was won by Mr. Harry Peters. And the next year, his father won that silver cup when he was 83 years old.
My word. That's pretty good.
But Fairhope was always a little bit ahead of most communities of this size. For instance, the golf course was not supported by any major company, but just by the people who played. And mostly retired people who'd come to Fairhope, many of whom lived at the Colonial Inn, and they organized, and we had a golf course. I don't know much about the origin of it. I know it started in 1914. But I made spending money when I was a boy caddying out there. And that was the main interest my main interest in the thing was that.
Yeah, you make money off of it. That's pretty good. Well, what I guess a lot of what you know about Fairhope's history is already recorded in your book.
Yes.
On Fairhope. And I would ask you about all kinds of things, such as the bay boats and other things.
The era of the bay boats on Mobile Bay went back to about 1820. Beginning before there were steam-powered boats, they had sailboats and other boats that traversed the bay. But there were no landing wharves in Fairhope. Obviously, there was no Fairhope when the bay boat business started. There was a wharf at Zundels, two wharves near where the Grand Hotel is now, and one right near where John Duck's house is, one at Seacliff and Valanta and Montrose, and 3 in Daphne. Mm-hmm. And our mail, when I was a boy, our mail was picked up along the shore each morning and taken to Mobile, our outgoing mail, and our incoming mail came back from Mobile in the afternoon. That mail was hauled by 2 boats who interchanged according to weather conditions, run by Captain George Bryant. And we had better mail service in 1970 than we have today.
No junk mail.
I wasn't
Oh,
over.
1970? No, I guess we did have junk mail.
I beg your pardon. We had more. I said 1970. We had better mail service 70 years ago. Let me put it straight. That's
all
where
right.
it was.
Okay, 70 years.
But those mail boats gave us regular service. No rain or no wind or no storm or anything interfered with them. The mail was picked up at the end of the Fairhope Wharf and hauled to the post office, which was in what's now the Masonic Hall building. Mm-hmm. And we had the family of Oswald who ran that office. Mr. Oswald was the postmaster. He had 2 daughters, and they did the work of the clerks. And if you mailed a letter to anyone in Fairhope, it would be delivered to the right person. I hesitated to sort of make that point clear.
Yeah.
It would be, mail was delivered to the right persons.
Okay. Very good.
I'm not critical of our present mail service. I think perhaps they're doing the best they can, but the 2-cent stamp was quite quite something back in those days. But you know, there was never very much cash floating around Fairhope. We had a number of retired people and semi-retired people who had incomes, people like C.L. Coleman and a few others. But nobody ever went hungry. And it was back in the days when people would help each other. And whenever anybody was in any trouble at all, if a house burned, the gang would get together and rebuild a new house, perhaps the same day.
Do you recall when C.L. Coleman, who's my grandfather, when his house burned on Ingleside?
1923.
23, okay. And they moved to town at that time, didn't they?
Apparently.
And
It was located in a subdivision which is now filled up, and for years we called it Ingleside Highlands. I don't know what they call it now. But it was surrounded by Fairhope Avenue and Ingleside Street and Morphy Avenue and Greeno Road. It was that block.
That's right.
That is the block directly north of where the hospital is located.
Yeah.
That house burned in 1923. It was a fine two-story house. What caused the fire, I don't know, but it burned one afternoon. I know it was 1923 because the Farmer's Creamery opened in 1922, and I was one of the delivery boys, and I delivered milk to the house out there, and it said Forsythe and Coleman. I don't know who Forsythe was. Maybe you do.
I don't. That's the first I've heard
Well,
of
he
that.
lived out there in the house with, I don't know whether he was a secretary or a cook or what he did, but it was Forsythe and Coleman.
I've never heard that name before. Isn't that amazing?
Well, that's the way it was.
I'll be darned.
You know, I can say these things because most anything I say about Fairhope, it can't be questioned because nobody was here.
Nobody? Well, now remember that Josephine Hawk is still around.
Who?
Josephine Hawk, Schultz Hawk.
She's about my age, but
That's
she lived 7 miles out in the country.
That's right. That's right. Well, she tells about the time, when you were talking about the mail, she tells about the time she got a love letter from someone in Fairhope, and it was not her. It was another Josephine. And she didn't realize it until she had opened it and started reading it, and she about had a heart attack.
Well, it was a Josephine Smith. She may have gotten Josephine Smith.
That may have been it, yeah. But anyhow.
Let me see. Josephine is an aunt of yours.
She's my husband's aunt. That's right. That's right. And
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
Try to get a videotape of her.
Madeline was
Bob's
your mother-in-law.
That's right.
And Josephine's Madeline's sister.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we can close down for today. Are you?
All right, I've talked enough.
Okay. We'll cut it off here then. Thank you very much. A word from Sam.
All right. So I'll tell you a little true story about your grandfather. An old colored man told me that one time, that as a young man, about the time he married, he used to call all the dances for the square dancers. And he could play the fiddle, call the dance, and take part in the dance with one of the pretty girls all at the same time. And the old colored man says that's the only man that could do that.
Well, I'll tell you what, if my grandfather could do that, he was better coordinated than I am.
Well, I don't know about that. All I'm telling you is what the colored man told me.
Okay.